Welcome to the Node.js Node add-on API team meeting for September 13th, 2024. Before we get started with going through our standard approach of looking at the team project, anybody have anything new announcements or anything they'd like to share? Okay, if not, I will share the board here and we can get going. Okay, so I think we've been starting at the right. Just looking through done. Anything there that we should chat about or bring up?
Yeah, I think I just merged the last item, last PR, the add a cleanable class to environment, which
Yep.
improves the buffer creation performance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Also, we have a performance pull request that added the buffer creation benchmark. It's not landed yet. I believe it's in the need change column because
No,
we only have.
it's there. It's in progress.
All right,
The
it's
first
in
one
progress.
in progress. The
This
first
one,
item.
okay.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
right.
It just needs another approval and then it can land
Yeah,
because it's in the 7-day period because I've already approved it. So if another person can approve it, we can land it like immediately.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll
I, I
take a look
actually
right after the
I actually
meeting.
ran this benchmark for against my PR to establish the improvement.
Good.
Yeah, the
Okay.
improvement is significant as far as I can tell.
2x.
Really? Oh, that's really good. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at that right after the meeting and get that landed.
Cool.
If anybody else wants to too, go ahead. Any other things in done that we should look at?
Nothing from me.
No? Okay. In terms of has PR, anything on these two? I think they've been going for a little while. I don't know if anybody has any things we should be looking at or
Um, I haven't been looking into the second one because I'm traveling to New York this week, so I haven't had a chance to look at it. But the first one, I believe the author is working on the test failure. So
okay.
the last time I checked it, it's the progress linked in the bottom, the 54506.
Okay, no. This one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe the test is failed, so the author is going to address that.
Okay.
The last time I checked it, maybe there is any updates. Yeah,
Okay. So yeah. Okay, I don't see any updates, but that sounds like it's still in progress then.
yeah.
Okay, that's good. And so this
I think
one,
the CI is being improved in recent days, so
yeah,
I'll try to land it soon.
yeah, it might need a rebase, but
Yeah, the author rebase state.
okay,
So as long as we pass the CI, well, I mean, retry the CI and to get it green, and it should be ready to land.
okay, sounds great. Okay, then in terms of the ones that we have progress, any of those we should dive into. I think we already talked about the first one.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth one, kind of near the bottom of your screen. Feet add support for require, I guess one more down. Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
Um, Gabe had some things last week. I pushed those. Chengzong already looked and approved, but Gabe, if you want to take another look at it
Okay.
was just documentation changes.
Okay, we'll do.
But other than that, should be good to go.
Okay. So that one, I almost wonder, like, should that be moved then into the has PR?
In Selfie, it's a PR, right? And the has PR is issues because we don't want to
Okay,
really go through issues that already have PR that we've
okay,
been checking.
right. Okay, got it. So I'll leave that. Okay, any others here?
It's a C-based API, if you guys want to discuss it a bit, or so I kind of mostly was spending
Wow.
time with PR.
That's a long post.
So
So
yes, other
I-
people have any questions or? That's
Sure.
is-
What
ahead.
is the current state of this?
So I kind of work in like I still have a bunch of to-dos, but definitely kind of would appreciate maybe discussing some kind of high-level approach I'm taking there. So technically, if you look on the PR itself, it's mostly most changes around like adding new tests, like pretty much all scenarios which I wanted to be implemented by APIs. Pretty much we have all these different new unit tests. So changes to existing code minimal, like to Node API mostly, like you see, just spell checker,
Right,
and
you found a spelling thing. Okay, yeah.
I can remove it if it's not big deal. But another one was actually I want to expose some function like invoke and module context. So technically, idea that then we have this embedding API. At some point, we want to invoke some Node API. If you like, we need to establish some bit of context, right? Like we need to effectively current isolate some other stuff, but also we inside of a Node API, we typically also kind of looking for checking all the different exceptions and other stuff. Like so, technically, some of this code, which currently inside of Node API implementation, I had to expose it. So I kind of we have these changes in Node API.cc. And embed
Okay,
helpers
so
is
that's
about
this one here.
yeah. So it's it was under some kind of anonymous namespace. I just made it non-anonymous and just use this new env effectively here. Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Right, that doesn't necessarily expose it under, so I guess you could now call this from C++,
Right.
whereas before you couldn't, right?
Right. It's actually I kind of used it in implementation of this Node embedding API. Also, it's been some changes thanks to your PR feedback.
Sorry, go. Where do you want me to go?
If you can go to PR kind of description, I have a summary of all the different functions, and maybe it's
Sure.
good place to start for us to discuss.
Okay, let me get back to that. So here, right?
Yeah, so some design principles, blah blah. We can talk about them, but technically, I think like this kind of very nice kind of high level view what this API is about. Like,
Yeah.
so first of all, I feel like people may say, if I'm from .NET, I want to invoke node.js. Do nothing, right? It's what this first function is about, like run node.js main. It's just you pass in arguments. That's it. No
And
customization.
you get the default. It's just as if you'd run that script like from the command line, right?
Right. It's exactly what
Yeah.
we do in Node executable file. It's
And that
exactly
wraps all of this other stuff, like all the calls.
right.
Yeah, okay.
I thought like I looked through. There is a link to issue where it's been discussed like several years ago, and I thought like you have some listed different scenarios. I think it was scenario number one in your list, which was
Right.
like just without any customizations. Second one, like
Yeah.
error handling. So technically, I tried a different approach, but I thought like it would be cool just to have some kind of global handler, which will be effectively every time invoked, and then it will have any kind of errors, and it's up to developers what to do there. The people can, for example, collect it with error strings somewhere and do something about them, or default error handler will be effectively just print to error output and whatever exit.
So is this where like unhandled exceptions and stuff would go?
No. This is more like think about the API exceptions. Like for example, we parse in command line arguments, and our internal node API has some kind of errors we need to report. Like, or for example, you can pass like dash dash version, and technically there is some text printing for this version, or like a V8 options. So it will go to this handler.
So if because yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering. Like, so once the JavaScript is running, it's like normal unhandled exceptions would just go to the unhandled exception handler that you set, right? This
Right.
would be more about when you're setting things up or things that are related to the embedding. So I guess my dumb question is like, don't I want to know those as soon as I run? Like, what kind of error would not be returned by one of the methods and pop up in this unhandled exception?
So pretty much all of them, like even you pass the wrong argument, say this handle will be called. So technically, think about like in today Node API approach we take, and we typically return some error code immediately from any function, and
Right.
then your code must go and say, I would like to take this exception. But what if this exception, we need to effectively keep all these exceptions somewhere, and currently in Node API, we don't keep any text. We only keep this enum effectively, but say, if I want to know which exactly argument failed, or on what line and what file this argument failed, I have no with such information. Everything what I have, like some argument was bad, and then you spend time to figure out which argument was bad. So I tried in this API different approach. What if we have this handler, we print all this stuff there, and if somebody wants to handle this maybe big text input, if you like, they can handle them. If they don't, like they can provide handler which just seems to say like I ignore all of them. So we still return error code from every function call. This is more like additional error info, if you like.
So I'm just trying to understand how I would use it. Like, I could see that might be a logging thing. Like, it would be an easy way to get the logs. But how would, like, say I say node embedding create platform, I get an error code, tells me, oh, you gave me an invalid argument or something, right?
Right.
Would I then, like, I'm just saying, like, I'm thinking through, like, how would I then say, okay, I've registered this handler. It obviously got this other thing. How do I tie that error back to the call I just made versus, like, if I sort of say, get me the last error, then it's very obvious, right? Like, I've got an error code, get me the last error. Okay, the error code you gave me is the one that I just triggered, right? Whereas with the error handler, I somehow have to like match those together.
Mm-hmm. But technically, what happened? Like then you have is give me last error code. Like typically, system needs to record this error somewhere, needs to record text and stuff, and you pulling it out. So this is more like a push technology. Your callback will be called all the time. It's up to you. You can store this text in some of your internal kind of text buffer, whatnot. And it will be pretty much the same if you would say, give me last error. You would just simply look inside of your buffer, and this will be your last error information.
But isn't the context lost? Like, how did you get into this error handler? What was the last API somebody called before you got, like, was it, node embedding create runtime? Is that the one that caused the error handler to be invoked? Or was it like node embedding runtime on preload? Which call caused the error handler to be invoked? Once you're inside the error handler, you'd have to have like one enum value for each possible API, so you know what it is that failed. Right? If I understand correctly.
So simply imagine like
I
can
could
be
see
a
a
lot of
case where they like you set your error handler to push all error texts to some vector or whatever. So that's set up, right? And then you call node embedding create platform. That fails and gives you some error code from the API call. So now you've known that errors, and then you just go into your vector and see what those errors were. That's sort of what I'm seeing, but I could see that there would be a disconnect between which API was called Like you would need to know, I called this API. Now let me check all the errors that I just collected. Let me check. Then you call another API, and then let me see what I'm kind of saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Go ahead.
only check errors, then text of the error, like then you have some error code, right? Like imagine that, and it's up to you. Like we give effectively you more freedom. Like if you have your error handler, it's up to you. You can just simply print them out, right, and exit your program immediately, or you can actually store like a only last error somewhere, or you can store a list of all possible errors. So technically, having this callback gives you much more freedom, like
Okay.
in implementation.
I get the freedom part. So like, but the part that I'm thinking about is like, but if I don't care, you just made my life harder because now I got to figure out how I store the last one. So like, I wonder if we want the best of both worlds, right? Like there's a simple error handler and like that lets you do like get me the last error and get more information. But then you also could register the error handler, right? And then you can do whatever you want, right? And it just like I'm thinking the simple case. I don't really want to do anything fancy. I just want to like call, get the stuff, and
So
I know
so
it's
the default error handler could be to store the last error, right? And
right,
so I
Right.
mean, you know, we could provide a default error handler. Like if you call node embedding on error with a null pointer, then or something like that. You know what I mean? Like we can provide a default, and then we can recover this get last error kind of operation. And then if you provide something else, then you know we don't save the last error, but instead we call this function pointer, I guess. So we could have we could have the mechanism in place that we have in regular Node API, which is to save the last error, right? But if we are given a function pointer instead of null, then we don't save the last error. We just give it to the function pointer, and it can do whatever it wants. And so we can get both worlds.
No,
right.
But
it's
And
we
I
not
still
think
need to have an
so.
API for getting the last
yeah,
error.
you would and probably to set it because you would want if you overrid your handler, you might want to like get it and set some other last error yourself, right? If you
Well, I mean, right now in Node API, we have an internal function, an API set last error, right? Um, or I think we also have a clear. But I mean, an API set the equivalent of an API set last error could be made to branch like this, right?
right, that's what I was saying. Like we probably need in that, a node embedding get last error and node embedding set last error.
Yeah, the latter being internal. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me speak tell you that it's not possible what you want.
Okay.
Repeating. So like in Node API, typically think about you in some very good kind of easy situation that you have single thread, right? Like and pretty much all your kind of environment, if you like, established. Here we have to deal with multiple threads. We have to deal with certain kind of structures not established. Like for example,
Oh,
you may have error, then you want to create runtime, like or you can create error while you're doing you something not exist yet,
okay. Okay. So,
or
so
you
we
have
have
multiple threads, like you have
we have
multiple
errors that appear asynchronously.
right. So technically,
Ah, okay.
getting last year maybe not feasible. Like, and if you want me internally
Mhm.
have some mutex to store it, kind of thread safe or do it per thread, it become too complex too easily, and it may affect some performance issues. And if people really want to do it on their end, like they can implement the error handler, all these different mutexes and stuff, but it will be up to user.
But that's where I'm like, do we have to force the user to figure all of that out? Like, because once you've created the platform, isn't the platform somewhere you could store, like do it per, or is there still multiple threads using the same platform?
It's just multiple threads, same platform, and think about like you
Right.
have error from one kind of thread and from another thread, and then you ask like, "What's my last error?" Like it gives you a last error from a different thread. I don't know. It's too easily become too difficult.
Yeah, I think the asynchronous nature of the errors precludes having like a last error thing because we don't want to synchronize something that works better asynchronously. So yeah, I totally get that. But then maybe the nature of the error, the structure of the error should be such that if the only way you could have gotten this error is by calling this API, then the error itself should have a hint saying that that API call eventually resulted in an error, you know?
Right, because technically, in many cases, like for example, if you have some wrong argument, what I'm doing, like I'm currently printing this is file name, line number, argument name. So technically, even you just use default handler, which just prints out to your error output, you would see it immediately what went wrong, right? Like you don't have to guess anymore. Like it's much more complete solution, if you like.
But like your actual code, so like you call node embedding create runtime, the actual code gets an error code and just says, I got an error. So I'm not going to look at the details. So it sounds like the embedding on error, like the error handling API is more about logging versus like doing something different in your flow itself, right? It's more like, okay, maybe I'm just going to exit and log some more extra information, but it's not trying to help you change what you're doing. Like you're pretty much either going to get an error and decide, well, you don't care if that error happened, or stop, exit. Is that right? I'm just because like in that case, I think if it's more of a logging thing, then
No, think like pretty much all these APIs, like they either all these APIs actually return an exit code
Yep.
which you normally return from your process. So
Yep.
technically, normal situation, the exit code is 0. If you have any exit code which is not 0, the kind of best course of action actually kind of exit your process. So technically, you end up execution. So technically, it means like a fatal error, like a not processable error. There is no way to handle these errors in user code.
Right.
For example, what it means like a wrong argument. It means that it's programmer error.
So that's like it's basically you expect Node API, like do they use the Node API statuses?
I changed this code. It's only none of them using Node API status anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense because we probably need a lot more. The other thing I'm thinking of is like, let's say your embedded environment runs out of memory or has like a heap overflow or something, right? And V8 kills the environment, just as it would node itself. Then you might want to restart, right? So you might want to handle that error and not just exit the process, right? Like I can imagine somebody implementing sort of a Kubernetes like resilience thing where it's like, if it gets killed, just restart it, and so you wouldn't bubble the exit code all the way to the process exit code. You would handle the error and you would say, oh crud, I need to restart the environment.
But on the other hand, like I think we could look at the Node add-on API. I suspect there's almost nowhere in that code that we actually like say get last error and do something.
Well, not us, right? Like no data on API is just a wrapper, right? So
No, I know, but
we are
like,
not opinionated.
but even the end users, I doubt that there's too many places where they, other than like logging it, or like I know we probably have lots of like if error do something, right? But I suspect if we look, there'd be very few places, if any, where we actually say, oh, get me more information. That more information is going to let us do something.
Well,
Right?
I mean, I can imagine an add-on that opens a database and the password is wrong and that's an error, and then it's gonna sooner or later throw an exception in JavaScript, and there's a try catch block that says, oh, invalid password. Okay, well, prompt for the password again.
But
Right?
that's different from, like, that's not an invalid argument to our method call. That's an application level thing. So I don't think that's the same situation here. I'm more like, you've made a call, you get an error. So it's the same thing as here. I
Right.
bet you, just like thinking as an example, I think the get last error is probably mostly used
Okay, I see
for
what you mean.
debugging and logging. And then now
Yeah.
I'm coming around to what Vladimir's saying is like, if that's true, any code that is there is just going to be the log some stuff, bail, and actually having that in a single error handler is probably easier than having to put it in after every call, right? And so like if that's really the use case, it's like all we're really going to
Makes
use
sense.
the information for is let's log it, and probably exit.
Yeah,
then
you're right.
actually
You're
this
right.
does make a lot more sense to me, right? So
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. Because this is mostly for for like the, well, for lack of a better word, for the add-on developer, for the person trying to establish this environment. In other words, the developer.
right.
So yeah, I think you're right. Because if it fails to launch for any reason, then they have to like change their code anyway, so that that error doesn't happen anymore.
It's okay.
Although I don't know, this out of memory error, um, I that's not the result of any API call. That's the result of like user code action inside this environment. So I think this is unique in that we don't see this in Node API, right? This class of errors, right? Where everything's running fine and you set up the environment correctly, but the environment fails, right?
We create memory, like we create C level objects in memory, and those allocations can fail. And I think
Yeah.
in those cases, again, like I don't think like I've never seen too much code that like when you run out of memory can actually cope with that, right? They either fail without you noticing or
Right.
they exit, right? So
Except in this case, it's a different thread, right? So the thread terminates, right?
but I think the handler would then say, like, I'm going to terminate everybody likely. Like, hey, I'm out of memory. What am I going to do? Right? Like things are going to start to go bad.
Well, not quite, right? Because if the child environment has like the V8 heap is full in the child environment, then that child environment is no longer viable, right? But it can be restarted because the parent environment is fine. There's no problems in the parent environment. So if you imagine like an orchestrator, right?
But
If the
I
parent
don't think a heap, I don't think an out of memory on the heap is related to any of these like you've set in these are all in setting things up, right? So like if you're setting up the environment, you're not running JavaScript yet, so you're not going to cause an
Mm,
out of heap. And so
okay.
basically that one I think would be like I've asked my script to run,
Okay.
it started running. If it gets a heap error, that will go to the existing unhandled exception handler, right? Like or your code handles it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll accept that, but then I have to ask, how do we handle teardown of the child environment? Do we have a callback for that? You know, whether the teardown is graceful or not. Do we have a callback for child environment teardown? And I guess that's a question to you, Vladimir, because do any of these APIs provide that? Because that's not the same as we have just established as receiving an error code, even asynchronously, as a result of trying to set up the API.
So what type of error, like tear down, like
Yeah, so like you know, child environment exited successfully, you know,
yes,
exit
yes.
code 0, or child environment ran out of memory, exit code 127, you know.
So yeah, let's start out of memory. Out of memory, like I'll tell you, even in Office code, like there is no way to recover from it. Like we kill application all the time. So there is no, I don't know any single program which can recover
Yeah,
from
yeah,
out.
yeah. No, definitely.
Okay,
Like if the thing that spawns the environment, right,
right.
runs out of memory, then yes, kill the process.
Yes.
But if the environment that got spawned runs out of memory, while because remember, this isn't like the kernel out of memory killer. This is V8 self-imposed heap limit reached killer, right?
Okay.
So the process may well have plenty of memory available. In fact, you know, you probably want to configure it in such a way that the V8 heap is significantly less than the available memory on the system, right? So so then let's say you have 5 of these child environments, right? And one of them gets a V8 heap out of memory, right? It needs to
Mhm.
be able to tell you, okay, bye, you know, and then you have 4 children left, you know,
I
and
think
then
that's
they continue working just fine.
Yeah, I
that's
posted a link in the chat that points to the current OM handler of Viet heaps in Node, in which we can do anything because it's just a JavaScript heap out of memory. So we can do things like diagnostic report or recovering from the because we can just wipe out the Viet isolate and the process is still Okay.
Right. And this is especially true in a worker, right? Like in a worker
Yeah.
thread, that doesn't kill the node process. It just kills the worker thread.
Yeah, exactly.
This makes me wonder, should the embedding API only let you start a single thread? And all additional threads need to be started through workers.
Yeah,
Well,
that
yeah,
Should we not avoid inventing a new way to start threads?
that's a
yeah.
good point. Yeah, yeah. So what is kind of the spirit of this API? Is it that you completely hand over control and you are no longer in whatever environment you were in? Like let's say you're no longer in like if you're doing let's say like C hash interop, right? You're no longer in C hash, but you're now in a JavaScript environment, but the JavaScript environment is an integral part of the process, right? If is that the case? Because then yes, then you should just bubble up and kill the process. Whereas, or are you in kind of a hypervisor, quote unquote, type situation where you can spawn any number of these? And then this is a new thing that Michael was talking about, which maybe we should avoid because we already have this thing called worker threads. So if you want to do multiple children that you control, switch control over to JavaScript and spawn a bunch of worker threads, and then we don't need to invent anything new.
I think we
But
have to answer the question that do we want to replicate all the C++ APIs in these C-based APIs? Because I want to
Yes.
focus on some specific real use cases with the C-based API
Oh yeah,
so
like
that we can limit the scope we want to expand on the C-based API. Or else, otherwise, we are going to replicate all the C++ API, then it will be really hard to maintain the work because we are duplicating the work in C-based APIs.
not duplicating, but technically idea that the C API can actually just simply wrap up some C++ APIs. Like if you look on the current implementation, I'm not doing, if
Yeah,
you, for
right.
example, C++ API, what that does, like can say what C API does, like most cases, like the C API just calls C++ API. So it's not duplication. It's more like how can people who cannot interop with C++, how they can still use libnode? So technically
right,
this is what API is targeting.
Yeah, I think the question is, what's the boundary between the C API and the C+ API we're going to expand on? Like like the work thread we just mentioned, are we going to expand it in C API? So I
Right. So
think
technically
that's the answer that I would like to know.
today in C++ API, you can create multiple what we call environments, right? So technically
right.
with C API, effectively allows you to do exactly the same. But I kind of see the point that we need to have like one main environment because technically our debugger infrastructure, inspector infrastructure only allows you to debug single environment at a time, but it can be inherited from by child environments. So technically speaking, I think it's a good model. Then you have a single environment, whereas like all others, they're more like dependent upon it, or like pretty much worker threads using this child environment. So technically, it's
I,
almost the same.
I think Chenzong's point that I heard was like, just because like the C API, C++ API does something doesn't mean we want to expose it in the C API, right? Like
Yeah,
actually exposing a small subset, if we think that covers most of the use cases, is probably a much better idea for us to start. So like just because the C++ API lets you create multiple environments, spawn multiple threads, that doesn't mean we should expose that in the C API to start. If actually we think that all the use cases could be covered by like, well, we let you run one JavaScript thing, and that one JavaScript thing starts like worker threads. If that covers the use cases we can think of, then maybe we should just start with that, and like we can always expand later.
Yeah, like as an MVP.
Yeah, and because that over the long term, if that's all people need, will be much easier to support.
yeah,
I agree
because
with you, but I do have a scenario which I'm kind of currently targeting to. We have ASP.NET server application, with ASP.NET Server application wants to use JavaScript, so through libnode.
Right. Yeah.
So technically, on if you like ASP.NET multi-threaded by its nature, what we really need to have ability to effectively run multiple threads in the libnode. If libnode actually in kind of called from this ASP.NET application.
Each with their own environments, right?
Right.
Right. And workers, I'm just like, again, thinking off the top of my head, like the existing workers, forgetting the fact that like the way you start them and everything, would they provide the equivalent of what you want to do for each of those threads?
Technically, yes, as long as we kind of control them, like we have ability to interop with .NET effectively from between these workers and
Because like again, I have, this is possibly impossible, but like if our APIs just use like, okay, we start the main thread, because like I guess we would start a main thread, we started a main thread and use that main thread to start the threads for each time you asked us to start a thread.
right.
For what it's
Would that give
worth,
us what we want, or is it like completely different?
you-
I
Like,
guess
does
so.
the-
Like I really gonna talk like it's kind of chicken egg problem, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to have some kind of API, start using it and see like if it works or not. Like, but think what I know for sure, I do need to have multiple threads, multiple environments from the beginning. It's one of the
for what it's worth, the concept of node : environment came about because of worker threads, right? Anna basically took all the stuff that is needed to run like a node environment, and she just kind of wrapped it in a nice bundle called node environment, right? So then in a sense, node environment came about because node needed to have multiple threads, where the initial thread, the one that got started from the command line, is special, but not very special. So in that sense, node environment is kind of made for launching multiple threads from C++, rather than launching one environment and then using JavaScript code to launch multiple child environments.
I
right.
guess one of the key differences here is like if we spawned a worker thread, then you wouldn't be like in this API, you drive the event loop yourself, right? And you could use a single thread to run multiple environments. Whereas with worker threads, you automatically get a thread.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, when you spawn a worker thread, it starts by spawning like a real OS thread and then initializing an environment on it. Yes, that's true. So you don't even get a chance to execute any JavaScript when launching the environment.
Right.
No, it's not true. Like this, can we walk through this API like a bit? Like so, thankfully, a lot of features already available in this API, and while I can actually maybe agree with Chen Zhong, maybe it's like maybe we should remove snapshot support, but I also kind of see like some scenarios where we need it. So anyway, we have, for example, right now preload callback. And I do have tests which show that this preload callback actually called not only on main environment, but also being called for any kind of worker threads as well. So it's pretty cool, actually. So we do have a way to control even worker thread environment. No, we can't control like a kind of event loop there, but we can control, for example, at least how it's been set up.
Yeah, I believe I can share the sentiment that we have many different various use cases with this API, but I believe my concern is that are we going to replicate all the features that is available in C++ API? If that is true, I think my concern lies on that it increases the burden, maintenance burden with the embedded API because we have to implement twice in C++ and in C. And it might not be even API stable with the because like particular for snapshot, it's not even going to be stable in a foreseeable future.
Yeah, we say that VC API is not API stable either. An approach which I propose in this API, it's kind of I kind of wrote down it a bit up. It's what to call like a build based on build pattern. So idea is very simple. Like let's look, for example, this platform API. So we have two functions: create platform, delete platform. So technically, these two functions, if you like, especially create platform, is effectively does nothing. It just kind of creates objects. So technically, there's very little chance that this operations ever fails, like because it just creates one, right? Then we have a bunch of kind of function calls, which effectively creates all these different options to initialize this object. So for example, we can say like set flags, set arguments. Nothing happens at this point yet. We can call this set functions multiple times because it's everything what it does. It actually kind of builds configuration, if you like. And you can change and build this configuration until this object is initialized. Then we call initialize. This way we kind of use all these parameters to build actually something, right? We initialize in this object. We can't change configuration after that, but after that object becomes alive, and any kind of object which was originally created must be deleted at some point. So this, if in future we ever need to add any kind of missing features, right? We can just simply add additional configuration if you like. So for example, I looked on some main code for Electron. Electron effectively has a lot of things that they need to do initialization, right? So if, for example, Electron ever would like to use this DLL and would like to inject their custom code, I think what we need to do in this API, just add additional configuration set method, right? So imagine like I would like to have some callback which will be called between say V8 initialization and V8 platform initialization, right? So we can actually start to use some pure kind of incremental approach to change this API in future.
Yeah. Well, you remind me that these APIs are not going to be API stable, right? This reminds me of a project that ports Vue C++ API to Rust. And it's not going to be API stable, but it allows Rust developers to use Vue C++ API in Rust fashion. It can be a separate project along with Vue because it's a binding layer. I'm wondering if the goal of these APIs are similar to the Rust V8 project that binds the node.js embed API to
Not exactly. I want
.NET.
to not exactly. At least initially, I thought that we will create some more like simplified API, like this builder pattern. Like it's actually, if you look with the shape of this API, is quite different from current C++ API. C++ API, like you said, you look with node.js file. It's a lot of moving parts there. It's a lot of code, right? So the goal here, like, can we have some kind of simplified version on top of it, which we can evolve with time? Ideally, we want it to be kind of API safe. It means, but we may not promise until we really start using
Yeah,
it.
we're just not promising it because we don't want to get into we want to give ourselves more flexibility, but we do want to keep it simple enough that it can be like not tied to V8 at all and ABI stable at some point. I think
Right.
it is quite like you look at the methods, it's pretty small in terms of the surface area. I can kind of agree with the snapshot one being one where it's like that's getting into an area that's pretty bleeding edge, and like so maybe that's one that
To be honest, the module one is also bleeding edge because we have upcoming module changes in the V8 and which will also affect Node.js implementation.
what does that module like? Okay, so what does
There is
that do?
a Node embedding runtime add module.
Right, which one is that? What does that do? That's
Add modules, it's pretty much adds kind of Node API module, like linked module.
I
The
see.
idea that so typically today, in order for us to use any kind of module, each module, we have one module per DLL, right? But what if in my executable, I can provide code for these modules? So everything what this code does, if you look at implementation, it's just using this add linked module API.
Is that, so that's a module you've loaded into, like you've even got in memory? I'm just asking that one because I think we've wondered about that in the past and we couldn't figure out a way you could actually load like equivalent of a shared library from memory.
No, it's not shared library from memory. Like think about it, you have executable, and inside of your executable, you decided to implement a few modules, or you can just simply link in some existing modules. So
So
with
they're
this add module,
they're JavaScript.
not JavaScript. It's C++ code. Like it's effectively native module, like an API module. So we have a bunch of examples how we can create NAPI modules, but we currently code say like each NAPI module must be in its own DLL.
Yeah.
But what if you don't want to have another DLL? What if you want to have, you're writing already kind of some code, say in .NET, and I would like to implement some native modules in .NET. They're part of my .NET application. I don't want to have separate DLL for each of them. So think like this add module, maybe it's bad name, like we can rename
Yeah.
it something else. It pretty much allows you to register a Node API module, which
Okay,
inside of your, it can be inside or outside. It will be effectively up to you. It's up to kind of embedder where this module actually
so
is.
this is basically something like after you call this function, and then you call require something from JavaScript, then this will essentially inform the implementation of require that, now there's this thing called XYZZY available, whereas before this function call, it was not available, right? That's what you mean.
Right. It's not exactly
Yeah.
required. We effectively using something like process dot something like a linked module, like it's some. In order
Right,
to
but
create this native module, you need to have very special syntax, not require,
right. No,
but you
what
can
I'm
wrap up
saying
with
is,
require if you like after that.
but if you, what I'm saying is the way to expose it to Node is to add it to like a list of modules that require now sort of understands. Whereas before it would have said, okay, module not found, right? But now you've added this thing that require is able to resolve, right? And this is the mechanism for adding it. One of many mechanisms, right? We have like the file system lookup, and file name resolution and all that, which require normally does. But now you're saying, let's add another mechanism for loading modules because it's needed for interoperating with C# modules, right? And they may even be statically linked, right? And they have some internal representation, and you have an automatic way of mapping that representation to something that can be exposed to JavaScript, correct?
Right, but I'm not adding. I just exposing what already exists in C++ embedding API. So technically, C++ embedding API already has something called add linked module.
Right.
So everything what this API does, effectively, it's exposing this linked
Okay.
modules. I'm not inventing new mechanism, and you
Okay,
don't
I see.
you
You're
don't see
wrapping
me
that. Yeah.
changing
Okay.
any code there because I'm just using existing APIs, existing
Right.
mechanisms.
Right.
And that
Understood.
definitely works across all platforms.
Yeah, after that, it will work across all platforms because technically, the only kind of change what I effectively done is how this callback looks like. This callback, and besides having this exports object or like a Node API environment, it also has some kind of callback data. So technically, you can also provide to this kind of registration callback some effectively data associated with your environment, if you like. It's only probably kind of, which pretty much in some sense exists today in a linked module. We have some pref data like private kind of void star pref, which been passed in C++ API, but we don't have it in Node API.
For what it's worth, I have seen this before with JerryScript. In fact, I implemented this for JerryScript. So in JerryScript, everything is statically linked, right? But we want sort of the common JS interface on that. And so you write your code as if you were loading something from disk, but the names that you specify are ones that are only recognized because at startup you manually go through a list of basically you go through this one data section that gets assembled from at link time. Basically, a bunch of structures from different compilation units get mapped into like an array, and then at startup, your embedded executable goes over that array and defines each module, right? And so the ability to sort of inject modules into the JavaScript environment for the purposes of adding functionality that wasn't there before, that is a well-known use case, right?
Right.
And so what Vladimir, as far as I can understand, what Vladimir just said is that node environment already has this mechanism for giving it a blob basically that has entry points that that have a certain well-known and well-expected structure, but otherwise it doesn't care how they are implemented. And this particular C++ API will take that blob, that executable blob, and it will expose it to JavaScript. And so that's exactly the mechanism that I did for JerryScript. And these blobs just happen to be coming from C# in some way, shape, or form, right? And now instead of passing them directly to node : environment : add blob, or Vladimir mentioned the name of the API, they're just going to go through the C API, which in turn will pass them to the C++ API, correct?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
In some sense, yes. Like, yeah.
So I think where we started was like the API seems pretty minimal. If we remove the snapshot ones and the add module one, I guess, like, again, there's like two or three functions which if we removed, you can look at it and say, well, like I can't imagine it being much smaller than this, right? Like it's create some abstraction, set some flags, start your script, drive the event loop. The one I'm curious about is the interop with Node API, like invoke Node API.
Mhm.
Why can't we just call Node APIs from the embedding code?
So in order for us to, if you think about it this way, like today Node API is mostly created for environments that are you inside of your module. So technically,
Yep.
it's always like node.js calls us, right? Like before calling Node API, we establishing current isolate, we establishing current context. We do a lot of setting up stuff. Then you inside of embedded environment, you may not have any of that.
Right.
So
Okay.
how to establish this environment for Node API to succeed, and effectively after that roll back and also handle any kind of Node API or JavaScript exceptions if you like. So for example, to call unhandled unhandled exceptions handler, right?
Right. So it would be a dumb, okay. And that's not stuff like if we had like a create and maybe you already have that, like a create a node API env. It's not stuff that we could do on creation of that env. It's stuff that needs to be done as the method is called, right?
Right.
Right, because you're not running under the env.
Right.
I'd have to, because I think that one's, I don't remember looking at that one. I guess, and similarly there, because like that's invoking a specific API, right? Versus.
No, this one you provided some kind of callback. Inside this callback, you pretty much can do whatever
Right,
you
okay. So that might be like, maybe it's just a naming. I would think more it's like, run, you're basically saying run this code in a Node API environment, right?
Right. So technically, this API has effectively three methods which you use exactly the same approach. Like one of them on preload. On preload, we effectively calling some same API with Node API environment. Another one we just discussed is add module. So technically, this initialize module callback pretty much has the same kind of setup and kind of tear down environment. And this one is effectively any kind of random code, if you like. We can be called there. Previously, I had something like open scope and closed scope. So technically, it's pretty much this one a replacement for that. We can return this open scope and closed scope.
No,
Open scope, especially,
I think I get where you're like this. I think it makes sense. It's just the name that threw me off because I read it and said, "Oh, you're invoking a specific API, right?" So it's more like I think with the proper naming, then I would have thought like, okay, yeah, that's you're saying run it under this run code under Node API environment, right?
Right. Again, I'm not native English speaker. Any better names are
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, I'll look at that and make some suggestions. Now, I'm just noticing we got 3 minutes left. So I'm just gonna say let's good discussion. Please, everybody jump into the issue and let's continue. Are there any other issues we should make sure we talk about? The one I'd like, I don't think we have enough time, but if people can think about between now and the next meeting is this one that I added, which is add typing to most of our examples. So that's in the note add examples. Somebody suggesting that I'm at the I don't know if we want to do that, but I thought it would be good for us to talk a bit about that so people can think about that between now and then.
Like typing as in JS doc typing or typing as in TypeScript typing?
Well, you see, it started with this add -d-ts. So I think it's like adding
Oh.
TypeScript types to almost all the parameters, and like I think they're trying to make the case that that makes it more easier to understand and easier to find matching examples. My initial reaction was more of we could use some examples of TypeScript in it, but I wouldn't want to shift them all.
Three.
But I
Yeah.
thought it would be good to have the larger group think about that and we can figure out what we think makes sense. So,
Okay. Sounds good.
so yeah, if we can take a look at that and we'll make sure we talk about it next time. Any others like that that people want to sort of flag for?
I have nothing.
Okay, thanks. So I'll say, Vladimir, thanks for entertaining our sort of rabbit holing a few different things on your PR.
I really
Good
appreciate
discussion.
it.
Not necessarily that we want to like totally change that, just exploring some of the different ideas and
Yeah, the
stuff.
implications, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love this discussion. Please, I mean, it's very important. I really want to be stable and kind of prove through this discussion. I really appreciate it. It's really cool.
Just quickly in the
Yep.
to-do, we have STD exception catching once more. This
Yeah.
one, I think you can assign that one to me now because
Okay.
I don't have that much on my plate now. So I'll
Okay, happy to do that. You can always assign yourself too, I think.
yeah, I can. I just saw that now. So
Yep,
I'm giving
no,
the
I will
team a
do
heads
that
up.
and I'll put it into the to-do then.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
In progress,
In
yeah.
progress. Yeah, yeah. Okay, perfect.
All right.
Anything else? Anywhere otherwise, thanks as always, a really good and interesting discussion. And we'll see everybody in GitHub next time. Thanks.
All right, talk to
Bye.
you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, lets me push the button. Okay, my browser has stopped working. Okay.